Patrick Kane, I play for the London Knights. A lot of people say I'm small and, my size, but it doesn't affect me.
In the spring of 2007, Patrick Kane was the favorite to go first overall in the NHL Draft. But scouts and teams couldn't agree on what he actually was. Some saw a superstar offensive talent. Others saw a small winger who cheated defensively, avoided contact, and weren't ready to rate him as the #1 prospect of the draft class. And now, nearly 20 years later, the hockey world is having that exact same argument again. This time, it's about Gavin McKenna. McKenna is a player with rare, electric offensive gifts that teams dream about, but also the same legitimate question marks. A perimeter-oriented style, a skinny frame, a lack of compete without the puck, and a lack of elite speed. So, is McKenna truly going to follow in the footsteps of Kane, a future Hall of Famer? Or are we looking at an overhyped #1 pick whose weaknesses will become a letdown for the Toronto Maple Leafs? To understand McKenna's NHL potential, we need to start with what happened last season. McKenna scored an absurd 129 points in 56 games as a 16-year-old for the Medicine Hat Tigers of the WHL. That 2.3 points per game clip is the most of any CHL player in their draft -1 season in the last 20 years, putting him in elite company. McKenna was on a Connor Bedard-like trajectory and the hype was through the roof. But now, after an NCAA season that wasn't generational the way we were promised, the tone around McKenna has shifted. The hype has cooled off a little bit. Some aren't even sold on him as the best prospect in the draft. The critical ingredient people are missing, though, is the context around McKenna's season. McKenna could have easily returned to the WHL for his draft year and scored 150 points with his eyes closed like Bedard did. But instead, McKenna took the harder path by jumping to the NCAA as a 17-year-old. And I don't think people fully grasp just how much of a step up it is in difficulty, especially for a smaller, lighter player like McKenna. McKenna was mostly playing against competition that was 3 to 5 years older than him. For a 17-year-old, NCAA hockey is kind of like going up against your older brother. Your older brother is bigger, faster, and stronger, so he's going to look to push you around at every opportunity. NCAA teams are also more structured defensively. There are far fewer freebie scoring chances and uncontested rushes. Despite that, McKenna still won the Big Ten scoring title by producing 51 points in 35 games for Penn State. He was still a top 10 finalist for the Hobey Baker Award, which goes to the best player in college hockey, and he still managed the 4th best points per game mark from a draft-eligible NCAA player in the last 30 years. Those numbers are excellent, but they're even more impressive when you consider the piece of the puzzle that everybody has been missing. The brutal truth is that McKenna's Penn State team was kind of mid. In fact, you could argue that he didn't have enough help around him, especially relative to other recent, highly regarded NCAA draft-eligible players. Penn State's roster only featured 4 skaters who've been drafted by NHL teams, and only 2 of them were picked in the first 3 rounds. For comparison, the Boston University team that Macklin Celebrini played on in 2023 featured 12 skaters already drafted by NHL teams, 8 of whom were selected in the first 3 rounds, including Lane Hutson, Tom Verlander, and Ryan Green. The University of Michigan team that Adam Fantilli played on, meanwhile, had 8 NHL draftees. This included 4 high pedigree first-round picks. Watching Penn State play, there were numerous shifts where the environment around McKenna was an issue. During some of McKenna's shifts, the other 4 players on the ice struggled to connect routine plays on the breakout. Here's one example. McKenna's entire shift was wasted because a relatively simple breakout on the opposite side of the ice was badly flubbed twice. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering, if McKenna is truly a superstar prospect, shouldn't he be able to do it all by himself? Well, firstly, McKenna's production was still top tier. And secondly, unless you're a generational talent like McDavid or Celebrini, which McKenna isn't, you need line mates that are smart enough to read off of you and get open. So far, this paints a really exciting picture of McKenna, but it isn't all sunshine and rainbows. He has flaws. They're real and they need to be discussed. The biggest weakness of McKenna's game is that he spends a lot of time floating when he doesn't have the puck. Let's watch this clip for example. Michigan's pass back to the point escapes the offensive zone, so they're looking to reload. The Michigan defender is trying to slash the puck across to the other side for the entry. McKenna just gives him a free pass into the zone. He recovers by intercepting a pass down low, but then he throws a backhand pizza up the middle and Michigan turns it into a scoring chance. We could keep going through examples, but the main point is he doesn't work very hard on the forecheck, back check, or in wall battles. Okay, but what does this all mean for his NHL future? And should it dissuade the Leafs from picking him first overall? I'd argue it's not a deal breaker. There's definitely a world where McKenna could face growing pains in the first half of his rookie season, especially at even strength, the same way that Jack Hughes did. In the grand scheme though, the concerns around McKenna are the exact same ones that scouts had about Patrick Kane in his draft year. Just look at this 2007 scouting report, which says, quote, even strength is the problem with back-checking the furthest thing from Kane's mind. Kane's defensive metrics ranked near the bottom of the NHL almost every year of his career, but that didn't stop him from becoming one of his generation's best players. The key though is that if you're going to be an inconsistent defensive player in the NHL, you need to be a true superstar offensive producer. You can get away with subpar defense if you're a 100-point player, but coaches aren't going to live with it if you're a skinny 60-point floater. This brings us to the meat of the video. How similar are McKenna and Kane? Personally, I see a blend of Kane and Nikita Kucherov in the way that McKenna picks defenses apart with his off-the-charts offensive toolkit. One of the biggest similarities McKenna shares with Kane is lightning quick hands and terrific edge work. This is why Kane and McKenna electrify despite their lack of elite straight line speed. They're elusive, they're shifty, and the offensive possibilities are endless because of how creative and deceptive they are. Kane and McKenna can slow the game down or speed it up. They can change the angle of attack and create something out of nothing with their lateral cuts, sweet hands, and ridiculous improvisation. Both of them are also elite east-west passers. They can find dangerous backdoor seams with a combination of deception and passing precision. They also both run the power play from the right side of the ice. Kane was a playmaker first and foremost, but part of what catapulted him into such a disgusting offensive producer is that he also had a feared shot that opponents had to respect. If teams started cheating towards Kane's passes, he could kill goalies from mid-range. Like seriously, this guy was a 2-time 40-goal scorer. If you don't have a shot that teams fear, your passes become overly predictable. The good news for McKenna is that he is actually a lethal mid-range scorer. It's not the best part of his game, we're not talking about petard-like lasers, but this guy can and absolutely will punish you from mid-range if you sag off in a shot, whether it's a snap, wrister, or the one-timer. This is a game changer because McKenna has also shown the critical skill of faking shots that bait defenders and open new passing lanes. This is where I see shades of Kucherov. Here, McKenna fakes the one-timer and turns it into a slap pass backdoor in classic Kucherov fashion. Here's another one where he drives the middle, pulls defenders towards him, and just slides it across. This is the genius IQ to fool the defense into thinking you're going to make one play, change up last minute, and burn them another way. McKenna also has a sixth sense for where his teammates are that you can't teach. Seriously, just look at this no-look backhand pass to spring a breakaway. Okay, but what about the perimeter concern? Is this style of play going to hold up in the playoffs like Kane's did, or is he going to be more like Artemi Panarin, where as the games get harder and more physical, you can maybe push this guy to the outside and limit his offensive damage? It's hard to make a decisive prediction. It could honestly go either way. There is a world where McKenna could go ghost in future NHL postseasons, which would be a hilarious fit in Toronto. But one bullish trend that McKenna and Kane share is an off-puck habit of continually slashing through the middle to get open. This is something Kane worked on religiously with the skills coach Darryl Belfry to ensure that he didn't just fade into the perimeter. You see it here, he's constantly finding ways to cycle back through the middle of the ice, which is where a lot of the offensive damage in the NHL was done. McKenna has that same tendency. He doesn't just fade into the background. By my tracking, about 48% of McKenna's points in the NCAA this season were scored with him making a play in the middle third of the ice. So yeah, he doesn't really initiate contact, but with and without the puck, he's smart and shifty enough to get to the middle with at least some regularity. This is why a lot of McKenna's points this year were off the cycle. It wasn't just rush offense. I also don't see many instances where he's cheating ahead of the play for offense. Yeah, his off-puck effort needs improvement in some areas, but we're not talking about a player who is scoring points because of any defensive shortcuts. Long term, I think you can coach him to improve his off-puck habits, and it won't inhibit his ability to generate offense because it's not as if he's blowing the zone early on a bunch of his points. Here's where I stand on McKenna after everything we've gone over. His production profile is elite, his defensive flaws and work ethic away from the puck are real. However, not only can this side of the game improve with coaching, experience, and some time in the gym, but defensive warts aren't the biggest deal in the world if you're an offensive game breaker, which McKenna should develop into at the NHL level. Ivar Stenberg is a stud in his own right, but to me, McKenna is the only player in this draft class with 100-point NHL potential. Sure, this year proved that he isn't generational, and our expectations for his rookie season need to be tempered, but in the long run, I do believe he will become an elite NHL player.